Okay. Hello. Welcome to Karate Without Belts. I'm John.
And I'm Marty from New Zealand, down here in the lovely sun, where we're reaching something like 80 degrees Fahrenheit today, and not what you guys are getting in the States.
Not what we're getting in the States. I'm making the grand assumption that everybody who's listening to this is in America. Well, most analytics tell me that's true. But which I will probably not be in America by the end of this year. We are prepping for a move, in fact, probably over to Japan. So, but when that's going to happen, will reveal itself in good time. But for those of you listening, kind of have a limited time to maybe send me some hate mail or fan mail. As if I put our PO box out here.
Sure.
But
of course, the bonus of this for me is now I've got somewhere to stay in Japan when I get there finally.
Yeah, well, you've never been, have you?
No.
That's a mind blower. But
I'm disturbingly under-travelled. My limits have been to Australia a number of times. I've been up to Papua New Guinea and to America, all work-related.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't had the chance to travel up into Asia or into Europe yet.
Which, if you listen to our first podcast, I've confused Australia and New Zealand with Asia. So.
They call it Asia Pacific. It's near enough.
Yeah, well, and it's like, is Australia a continent? Everyone will say yes. What about New Zealand?
Nope. Too small.
Too small to be considered a continent.
Yeah.
But not big enough for a prison colony.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We were the place people went to after the prison colony. That's what happened with that's how my family got to New Zealand.
Really?
So yeah, somewhere way back, a great-great-grandfather of some description on my mother's side captained a ship full of convicts to Australia, then sailed to New Zealand and stayed here.
All right, that ought to do it.
Well, it did. Yeah.
I've my family heritage is like question marked because one of my parents is adopted, and one of my parents is they were immigrants from Italy. So they basically what happened was my great grandmother. Yeah, it was my great grandmother was in a car driving back to her farm from the city in Abruzzo, and a German plane was flying overhead, and then kaboom went the farm.
Huh.
So yeah, they had the option of staying there, but if you think 1918, which is 100 years ago.
It is
today.
Now, yes.
Yeah. They were like, we could stay in Italy or we could go to America. And they kind of made the right choice because otherwise they would have just been caught up in not one, but two great wars. But
that wouldn't be cool. Yeah.
No, it wouldn't. And then my family would have been, my grandfather, who was 16 at the time, would have been conscripted. And so, interestingly enough, he wasn't conscripted here. In between either of the, I think he was citizenry, like he had to do stuff here because he was still getting naturalized here. I'm not 100% sure what that story was, but yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Anyway, how you been, mate?
Yeah, good. It's yeah, like I say, it's summer down here, so the weather's fine and the living's easy. I think someone wrote a song about that once. Yeah, regular classes started this week in my dojo, and as is typical before school returns, we always have really low class numbers. So Monday night, we had 4 or 5 people, and we worked on what did we work on? We did some bow stuff, and we did a lot of sparring technique. And then Thursday night, I had 1 regular student and a new person dropped in about halfway through class. And we spent the whole class just doing real basic bow technique. So that was my training week. Other than that, yeah, work had that tendency to just get in the way of everything this week. And that probably segues, once you've had, say your little bit perhaps, that segues nicely into what I believe our topic is, which is something about balance and learning in life.
Yeah.
So I haven't had a particularly balanced life this week.
Yeah, and I can second that because of just moving worries and woes and trying to get because I'm an adjunct professor at several different places, and one of these places decided to be like, yeah, you remember all that work you did? We're gonna cut your class load in half. So good luck paying rent.
Yeah, that's what you need.
Yeah, so it's kind of stressful, not as stressful as some other Americans who work for our federal government, which as of today got reopened. So, yay, we can make this podcast a little historical by saying today the government in the United States after 34 days was closed has finally been reopened.
Oh, really?
Yes, it just happened. It just happened right before the recording of this podcast. The American government did reopen, so I no longer fear flying.
Yeah, fair enough too. Yep.
So, not that there was an it's kind of like the Cold War when we were worried about nuclear bombs. Now we're worried about planes falling out of the sky because people aren't doing their job.
Yeah,
because they're not getting paid for them. Yeah, well, no, people can be there. They were forced to work there.
Yeah.
And they were forced to work without pay, which in this country is considered slavery. And although many people think that it was a great thing, we kind of had a war about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But in terms of training, I have determined that I am not a come home and train guy. I have determined I need to go somewhere at this time of day guy if training's going to happen. In the morning, totally can wake up and get going. In the afternoon, probably as well. But once you're through an 8, 9, 10-hour workday, I'm ready. We both have been training martial arts for a decent long while, and if we aren't home and we're somewhere where training will happen, I think you'll agree with me. Our training instincts are just gonna kind of kick in and be like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
But if you're home, you're home.
Yeah.
So. And I think that's what was the killer for me, because a lot of the time I would, in the morning try to get stuff done and then try to get training in, but there's always some excuse. And then you come home and then it's just got to get the kid, got to get the dog, got to get something.
Life kicks in. Yep.
Yeah, and I think this is our second segue to the topic today. I think that goes into balance and working as a martial artist in general, which in English sounds much more pretentious than it does in other languages.
Sure.
How we balance training with our life, and I think it would be good to just talk about our experiences with that and kind of what we viewed with other people and kind of the extremes where it goes, because it's a spectrum. It's not just one way or the other. So
yeah, we can officially say we're on the spectrum. Yeah.
Yes, we are. There's a spectrum.
Oh, hang on. Spectrum.
I taught this word to my ESL people, and they're like, "You mean ghosts?" I'm like, "No. I mean, things are on a kind of a scale." And they were like, "Of weight?" I'm like, "Kind of, but with other stuff." So I think.
That's awesome.
One thing I think this illustrates it quite well. If we think about martial arts and we think about karate, and think about people who we consider people who are proficient or masters or whatever you want to call that, when we kind of turn back the clock of that century or two, most people who were doing that were of two ilks. A, they were paid to do it because they were in some sort of military or police or whatever.
Yes.
Or B, they were independently wealthy and could do that in their leisure. Sometimes both, right? And this spreads across all cultures, right? Rich people have guns. Rich people will have the weapons. Rich people have the time to get good at that stuff. Or if you're paid to do that, or if you're good at it. And that feeds into modernity, more so with if you're a cop, if you're you're serving in the army, if you're in security services, anything like that. It is your job to be good at martial arts. because that's exactly what you're doing. Defense, self-defense, guarding things. It's your job to day in and out study and know this stuff. Or if you're independently wealthy and have nothing else to do with your time, and if you're not off trying to kill endangered animals, hopefully you found the path of self-improvement.
Sure.
But for the rest of us schmoes who work a 9 to 5, who've chosen this path as well, it's not so easy.
Yeah, no, I agree. For me, some of the best balance between work and training I ever had was actually running my own business. So I could work from home as an engineer, designing and implementing solutions in industry, and I could be sitting in front of my computer, working away at something, and come to a point where you get that block and you can't solve the problem. And it was quite cool to be able to just go, get up, grab something, go outside and swing a weapon around for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, do some kata in the sun, whatever it was. And invariably, somewhere in that process, I go, oh yeah, that's how you fix that problem. Finish what I was doing, go back in, sit down, solve the problem, and the cycle can start again. So for that 5-year period where I was able to do that, I balanced my training with my business and family life really, really well. And running the dojo was actually part of the business. So yeah, it all just worked so smoothly. Now I'm back as a regular pleb, earning wage and salary. It's not quite like that. There's things I'd like to do with the dojo that I can't schedule in around a regular work day. I'm expected to be in the office between 8 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon, sort of thing. So yeah, it makes it that little bit harder. The other time when things worked really well, or semi-well, was when I wasn't running a public dojo. I was running private lessons from my home, and I would come home at 4:30 in the afternoon. My first student would arrive at 5:30, and I would have 3 students a night, 4 nights a week, for 1-hour classes. So that was kind of cool. Although after a couple of years, it sort of got long in the tooth too. When you're losing 3 hours a night every night, and like you say, when you're in another location training, when you leave home and you go to a venue to train, it's okay if your family's okay with it. It's acceptable to spend 12 hours a week in that other location. But for me, when I was spending 12 hours a week, literally 6 feet from my family, who were through a wall, I found it difficult towards the end, and that made the decision to open a public class again that much easier.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of temptation from people to say, I don't want to do public classes. Private classes are fine, which might be a different discussion for a different time. But either personally training or teaching in a class, it takes something out of you. And especially when you are on some sort of grind, or you're doing multiple jobs and you're trying to keep, the wife and kids happy, or the husband and kids happy, or the dog happy, it is difficult, and to maintain a level from youth. Because I remember when I was in high school, I got my black belt. And I was like, I'm going to train every day. And I did exactly that. I went to the karate school every day I could. If it was open Sunday, I would have gone on Sunday. And I went every day I could. And no longer training with those people, but that really put in a lot of gray matter in my head, which was helpful later on. But then when it came down to not actually having a place, it became super hard. And I didn't realize this, but it was actually destroying my grades, keeping me from focusing in school, giving me a weird social slant. And so I think that's totally possible to train every day if you have the time. But this goes down to having some sort of self-discipline in order to know how to do that and what works best for you. And with the obligations of family and work and whatnot, you have to know what works best. And I've seen it time and time again where some people will, go in hard for X number of years up
Mm-hmm.
until a certain point and then just quit.
Yep.
And I think that's what kills a lot of people with
Burnout.
this.
Yep.
Yeah, and we both have come back from that.
Uh-huh.
And I
Yeah,
think
very true.
that's really, if anyone's listening to this, if you can hear us, people who are listening, and if you have never experienced burnout, I never wish it on you.
Yeah, it's not a lot of fun.
No, it's not, because it's kind of slowly seeing the thing you love diminish.
Yes.
And
it's
sad.
the physical and mental toll of it as well. For myself, my burnout occurred around about the same time as the global financial crisis, and I'm still working through medical issues that I encountered, or whatever, however you want to put it, that I encountered from that thing 10 years ago. The world stopped turning as it should have for me, and I wound up on some wild medication for a long time, gained a lot of weight, and from that have had a massive task trying to lose that weight and get back to the physical condition I used to be. And I'm not the only person. In my would you call it journeys since then, I've met probably 6 or 8 other guys who went through exactly the same thing, used the same medication, and have the same problems, despite the fact that scientifically, apparently, there's no side effects. We won't go into that either. But yeah, all these guys, same as me, went through a massive burnout phase, a massive mental trauma. The medication they were prescribed to help get through that caused weight loss and other physical changes, which has changed their whole training or physical capability. And these other guys aren't martial artists; they were in other sports, but they have the same.
Wow.
We're all telling the same story. So again, it ties back to balance. If things had been a bit better balanced back in 2008, 2009, I certainly wouldn't have had the experience that I went through. That's for sure.
And I think some of it goes down to expectation, right? Because especially once we've passed that threshold of not just being a student but becoming a teacher, running something, there's a self-expectation to raise the level or stay in a certain place. And if life hits you hard, then that expectation goes higher, and then possibly perceived expectation from others, not necessarily what they actually expect, but what we think they expect, goes up. And we don't talk about this enough with martial arts, but there's a whole psychology, not just with self-defense, but with training, that for whatever reason just doesn't get addressed in a healthy way. And I think when it comes to balancing, it's okay to take the slow road. It is better to take a slow road than to be stopped.
I think there's more than just it's okay to take the slow road. Looking back on that last 10 years, there are, and even beyond that, there are things I would, if I could do it again, changes and decisions I'd make and take things slower. Slower, and not necessarily better thought out, but stop taking so many steps trying to take so many big steps, just make it into smaller chunks, and things would have turned out possibly different. But it definitely would have changed me physically. I would have a different outlook on things physically.
Yeah, and
so that's that whole the balance. It's huge, man. The balance. It's like you see it even in other professional sports. Guys burn out. They go hard. Something goes wrong. The wheels fall off, and next thing they're not the latest sensation. And I know. Right. In fact, we had this discussion offline when we were talking about what topic that this podcast should be about. And I said, we said balance. And I said, yeah, a lot of the high-ranked martial artists I've met, and not just one, but I can think of 5 off the top of my head, guys that I've trained with who are striving to be at the absolute leading edge in their martial art, world's best, yet they can't hold down a job, they can't hold together a family, they haven't held together their marriage. Everything falls apart because they're focusing so hard on achieving that one goal of being a martial arts, and I say this with air quotes, a martial arts master,
Right.
that everything else falls apart. And to me, that's not right, because my interpretation of a master, particularly in a pursuit which screams so much about balance and living, the what would you say, the stereotypical martial arts image is a perfectly balanced Zen-like master.
Right.
Well, you can't be a perfectly balanced Zen-like master when you had 4 divorces, you've got 12 different kids to 8 different people, and you can't hold down a decent job. That's not a Zen-like master. And I think looking forward to the future, what martial arts is really about. I was actually discussing this with a guy last night over a lovely cold beverage at the local pub. We were
Coke.
saying, sorry?
Coke, right?
Yeah. Well, it was actually, because I've stopped drinking this year, so I've knocked
right
the
on.
alcohols on the head. So yeah, in my case it was. In his case it wasn't. But anyway, so we're
Right.
sitting there talking about the future of martial arts, and in the old days, like you mentioned earlier, it was your job as a martial arts master was to be a very highly skilled fighter, very technically competent. It was, in some cases, in the older days, it was life and death. That doesn't happen anymore. Very few people who walk into any dojo are going to be, or any martial arts school of any sort, are going to be world champion UFC fighters. It's not even less than 1%. It's got to be less than 0.1% will ever achieve that. Most people who come in are simply looking for a feel-good exercise that challenges them. And it's on the same level as tennis or golf or rugby or baseball. It's the same thing. So what are we really giving people? We need to give people the tools to have a balanced, successful life. You need to be able to give them the mental fortitude, the goal setting, the discipline, that goes with achieving the things you need to achieve to live and survive in today's world. And that's not necessarily having incredibly conditioned hands and shins and being able to kill a bull with one single punch. That's not of no relevance at all today. The ability to keep calm, keep yourself in control, manage a quality career, generate a good income, and build a protected, sustained lifestyle for your family is more important. And I think that's what martial arts is really about now. And we need to still preserve the old ways and the techniques. And everyone does get to punch each other in the face a little bit, because that's fun too.
Yeah.
But really what we're doing is we need to provide people with a balanced life, a life that at the end of it, they say, you know what, all this karate stuff I did for 60 years helped me build this really strong family. I've got this great, I'm leaving a great legacy to my grandchildren's, my descendants, and to the people I've interacted with throughout life.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of heard people talk about that. In our journey, and they haven't exactly lived it. But I think that should be what people think about when we think about people who do karate.
Yeah.
And any other traditional or any other martial art otherwise. I mean, this goes for everyone, but especially for karate's case, we do kata. Even though there's nothing in my research that points to meditation being a function of karate, but it's definitely has been incorporated in many different settings, and it's there, Mushin and stuff like that. And just being able to balance your life and being able to be honest and and true about that. You know,
Yeah.
people being the master means being the gentleman, being the person who can step up and be a leader in a community, or be even a contributor in a community.
Yeah.
Right? We don't talk
Yeah.
about that. We talk about the kicking and the punching, and this guy is blah blah blah. Like, and there's plenty of that, believe you me. But at the end of the day, the goal has to be exactly what you just said, is leaving that legacy. And I think that's where you get the schools out of, because not because those people were the best or because those people were the greatest, but because those people built something that lasted.
Absolutely.
And those people were balanced. And you look at other schools and other people who have great technique, no balance, everything's in shambles.
The wheels fell off.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and that's far and wide. One of the examples I look at, and I've said to a lot of people, I've gone, why did Shotokan do so well? Why has International Taekwondo done so well, or World Taekwondo? All these other enormous organizations.
Right.
And the first thing that seems to be the common response these days is, oh, but they're all shit in the UFC. They don't survive in the octagon. No, they don't. But they've got a member base full of people who are extremely good examples of, as you say, leaders in community.
right.
You know, no offense intended, but Conor McGregor is not someone I want my kids looking up to as a role model. But then I'll take somebody like Tony Robbins, and that's as cliche as you get. Tony Robbins, yeah, has a black belt in Taekwondo. He's a multi-millionaire success coach for some of the largest organizations on earth. Which one would I rather have my kids look up to and mimic? That, to me, that's a no-brainer.
And that, I mean, for me, as a Philadelphian, I always will point to the Rocky movies, despite you've never seen any of them.
Yeah, I'm a letdown.
It is, but yeah, it's all right. We'll fix it soon enough. I think it's like, you know, you look at that movie and it's like, that guy is actually a leader in his community, despite the fact, like, at the beginning, he's just some idiot with a ball, like running money for the mob, like,
right.
Yeah, and he's like literally trying to walk people home who might be in danger. He's just trying to help people out, but he also feels, you know, he's a boxer who's trying to be a decent guy in his community, but doesn't have the brains necessarily and the know-how to do it. But I mean, you don't necessarily need to have had the largest dojo from a karate perspective. There's I forget his names precisely. He was one of Soken's students, and I know he died about maybe 12 years ago or so. But he was not well known, and he was not well versed by many people. He had students. There's like one surviving website that talks about him, and all he was just a bento box guy running a bento shop, making bentos. And he had neighbors who apparently never knew that he did martial arts. But he had a bunch of students, like very, very small, modest amount of students, but they all knew him and tried to make him known. But he's just a dude making bentos, doing martial arts. It's the kind of the Mr. Miyagi thing. But we'll talk about that. That's another discussion for another time. I'm going to put a pin in that because I've got my thoughts on that whole thing.
Right.
But to give context to that, you know, like he was just a guy in Okinawa trying to make a living. Many of them did after the war. But those guys who had the schools that continued to keep going, even if they're big or small, they managed to do so by being, you know, taking the moral lessons of balancing your life, of making sure you're taking care of your kids, you're taking care of your wife, you're taking care of your community.
Yeah.
Those who didn't, how far and wide is their legacy spreading?
Yeah. Yeah, one thing's just popped to mind actually. It's something that a dojo, you and I both know the owners, they're out the way. They're in your end of the world, out around Phoenix way. And there was one thing that they do in their class every year about this time, which every year I remember about this and I go, I must do that. And then I never get around to it. And
Right.
they, well, I never make it a priority to get it done. That's a better way to look at it. But what they do is they do a goal setting class, and they take the time in that training session, sit down with their students, pens and paper, and they set goals for that year. And the goals are not necessarily martial arts related. So they might, you might sit down and set a goal to save $1,000, and then they, I believe they check in on that and track the progress as the year progresses, as part of their, that's part of their dojo culture. And to me, that's a great thing, because you're going to use the same commitment, dedication, and create an anchor back to your martial arts training. And at the end of the year, when little Johnny saved $1,000, he sets there's a memory set there. There's a thing set in his mind, a trigger in his mind, that if I want to achieve, then I do it the way I did it at karate. And we set goals, and we got things done, and we tracked it along. And that'll create someone who stays in the martial arts for life. If if things keep moving in that general direction, that person will stay in the martial arts for life. And even if they don't continue training for the rest of their life, they're always going to reflect back on, there was that one time when I saved that $1,000, and I did it at that karate school in Phoenix with that great family, those two people, and that was really cool. And that kid could go on to be a billionaire. That $1,000 that he saved could be the root that creates the next Bill Gates. That's insane, man. That's a that's not responsibility isn't the word. That's the opportunity we present to students as instructors.
Right. And I mean, what we can do is just have them hit the back. And look, this is not us saying ignore training.
No.
Right. But that's saying add, to make that part of that training.
Absolutely.
That, right.
Yeah.
Because you can. And you should.
You and I, the organization that we came from, that we met through, has this saying, karate no michi, which, whether it's right or wrong grammatically or accurate,
it's correct. It's correct.
It is pretty good.
No, karate is my path.
Yeah.
How often it with Japanese, how often it really gets said in the class, it's a different story. But I mean,
yes.
100%.
Yeah. So that whole idea, that concept of taking the discipline, the goal setting, these individual components that we learn within a karate school, and applying it to every aspect of our lives and helping other people to apply it to their lives, that is probably one of the most valuable things I learned from what turned out to be 12 or 13 years in that organization, straight up.
Yeah, and I think also the lessons taken away from that is also, the need to kind of lead more by example, not lead with words.
Yes.
I like to kind of just put things into motion and see where they go.
Yeah.
And I think that goes into another part of balance, is where you get a lot of people who will, do the master claim or whatever, or I'm the big guy and everyone's got to listen to me and all this other stuff. Every time I've run into somebody I really respect, it doesn't matter if it's martial arts or otherwise, they demonstrate their knowledge or their leadership ability or their abilities or whatnot by just doing it unabashedly, unashamedly, but with a certain sense of, grace and critique and kind of self-critique.
Right.
And when I've seen that kind of fall apart because for whatever reason, somebody needs to aggrandize their ego, they have cut off learning for themselves. They have cut off criticism. They have cut off the ability to even self-reflect or something like that.
Yes.
And if you cannot do that, you cannot create change. And that's what life's about. Karate is going to be about change. Your karate will change from the time you start to the time you're done.
Yes.
That should be what it is with every time you practice.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's one of the biggest things I took away from seeing that. And I've seen this with many people, but when this was back when I was learning, I didn't learn how to swim until I was 27.
Sure.
And I saw someone act completely, like they were the top guy, they're ahead of everything. Everyone else is wrong and everyone needs to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw a lot of other people just shake their head and kind of enable that behavior, I said to myself, not to, I was a coward and didn't really speak my mind, but I just said, you know what, you need to be teachable.
Mm-hmm.
You'll learn more. You'll be better.
Yes.
And like, sure enough, the next year, and I was terrible at swimming. If you talk to my swimming coach, she would have just been like, "Oh my God, this." And this was in Japan too, and it's like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. But when I did swimming for a competition, it was just an island triathlon.
Mm-hmm.
Out of everyone I knew who was doing it, like, I swam the fastest. Somehow I was able to do that from just keep on working, keep on listening, keep your mouth shut, and stay focused on the goal. If you want to add those other things in, that's fine. And
that sounds like the same recipe for getting good at martial arts, right?
Well, exactly. Like, and that's that, and for anything, but that's what I see a lot of people will, and I think this comes from more of a need to kind of prove whatever, as opposed to just doing the thing. Just do the Nike thing, whatever.
Yeah.
But when a big part of imbalance is ego, and when you just take that pedal off the ego brake a little and just start doing it, you get better at it. When people kind of get that ego on top of it, things stop getting better, things stop changing, things remain stagnant. You're not gonna do anything new. You're not gonna be better at what you do.
Yeah.
So
ego's a massive thing. I mean, I would say that'd be another podcast topic, but to be honest, it's too bloody negative for my preference. But when you're teaching people, this is from my personal experience in learning to spar or fight in any way. Ego has to leave. You can't learn to fight in an environment where your partner has a problem with losing. If you want to learn to spar properly, the person who's doing the attacking, doing it in a drill sense, the person who's doing the attacking has to be 100% committed to losing that fight and letting their partner gain from that experience. If everyone's trying, if ego gets in the way and everyone's trying to win, you don't actually develop skill. And you see that in the scrappy nature of some free sparring that happens in some classes. You have to push that aside, build the skill base first, get good, then compete. Then you can then a bit of ego can get in the way when you're competing and you've actually got the skill to do it right. But it's the same in life. In fact, it rings a bell. I'm hiring a new engineer at the moment for my team where I work. And I've had an applicant come in, an external applicant has come in and said, I'm an engineer. I've been working for 2 years since I left university. It's just something like 23 years old. And I'm currently earning $85,000 a year, but I deserve to earn more. I deserve to earn $120,000 a year. And I'm looking at this going, mate, you're 23. You've got 2-3 years experience. And you're telling me that you want to earn the kind of money it took me 20 years to get to? I don't think you've got that skill. And you've got a hell of a chip on your shoulder to stand up and say that in a job interview. That's as cocky as fuck as far as I'm concerned. It just stuck out as a really bad... the person won't get an interview, but I'm really tempted to give them an interview just to sit in a room to find out what is going on inside that head. That just doesn't ring true. And I see the same thing happen in the martial arts all the time. And again, it comes back to balance. You want to be 23 years old with 2 years experience and earn the same amount as a senior engineer who's been at it for 15 or 20 years. That ain't balanced.
Or
and you get
if
it. Go on.
Or if you do actually think you're worth it, you don't go out and say, I'm worth this. You get it.
Damn right.
You actually
yeah.
prove it. If
Yeah,
you can
that's
prove
right.
it,
Your
then
actions prove that you're worth that.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, and this goes back to this goes back to kind of where this podcast comes from. Like we think a lot of people ask me about the title, and they say, "Oh, you don't believe in belts." I'm like, no, but it's that the talent, whatever, is going to shine through of whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Your ability, your potential is going to
Yes.
shine through whatever
Yes.
you're going to do. We actually happen to those who may wonder, we actually train in a style. By the time you're Udansha, you don't really wear a belt. So
Yeah.
that was actually
And the new organisation I'm associating with, they don't even that I'm working with and learning from now. They only do one grading to get from coloured belt to a black belt. He said in air quotes. Once you pass that, there are no Dan ranks. So you're just Udansha. You're a black belt. So shut up and get on with it. And everyone's the same. And the only people who lead are the two guys who founded the organisation. They're in charge of the general direction. And in my dojo, I lead, and that's about the size of it. I lead because I pay the bills, but that's where it stops. And I think it's going to be an interesting concept to try to bring to the public, because the especially Western perception of martial arts is that once you get a black belt, you have to have so many Dan grades. It's going to be an interesting thing to say, well, actually, no, we've decided we're not doing that because it's crap. Well, it's not crap. We don't feel it has a place. And it's where I think it's sort of where we came from with this karate without belts idea was, let's forget about who ranks who and who does what and who eats cheese, and just screw it, man. Let's talk about martial arts, and let's talk about how to make it better. Yeah, I like cheese too, but that's another podcast.
Exactly. That's our Cheese Without Wrappers podcast.
That's right. Yeah. Actually, it makes me wonder now. You're moving to Japan, and now you've raised cheese, and the first thought that goes through my mind is, I wonder what Japanese cheese is like.
Not bad, but there's not enough of it.
Is that right?
No, if you think of it tangential, but if you think of it this way, European, and by extension, New Zealand, Australia, and America, inherited European style of eating, which is lots of grains. America's probably doing too much on cheese and sugar, but cheese and sugar. Japan generally, most things don't really have cheese unless it has some sort of European influence. Even that, it comes quite to the minimum. And refined sugar, though, is there. It's not in this massive quantities that you may find within European and other stuff.
I still remember my first trips to the States, and I just could not believe how much sugar is in food compared with what we have in New Zealand. And I don't know what your experience was like, but when we had people come out to New Zealand from the States, and we'd feed them what we consider normal food, and they couldn't believe that it was so fresh and straight off the vine and straight out of the garden, and no sugar added, and even everything, even our bread and butter and stuff, and they could not believe how natural it tasted. And to us, it's like, yeah, well, that's normal. And when we come to America, everything tastes like a donut. So, yeah.
Well, that's there you go for balance right there, because
that's balance as well.
Yeah, because when I came back to the States, because I think this is, it's quite easy to see sugar has as much as an additive as methamphetamine. The problem with a lot of people is they can't put down they need to somehow get some sort of sugar fix.
Yeah.
And I found this when I went to Japan, when I was living there. Like I barreled through like 2 boxes of Oreos a week just to kind of weirdly get that fix. But if you look at the kids, like when the kids get lunches there, it is balanced. It is 100% balanced. Everyone eats the same thing. And more or less no one brings lunch.
Did you get over your Oreo fix over time?
I mean, no. That was just kind of like, it was just more of a, this is something I recognize.
Sure.
But once I kind of got past that, it wasn't until like the first month to actually find my footing. But once I kind of got past that and started getting used to, okay, this is what's available to me, then you kind of learn to adjust. And when I moved there, I was still kind of, it was maybe the first year out of college I was there, like out of schooling altogether, and that finding the balance of just, all right, this is how I cook for myself. All right, this is how I don't like go to the bar every night. This is because, you know, when you're a graduate student, humanities degree, you know, you have to be an alcoholic.
Right.
So that taught me quite much. That like, and when I came back to America, the switch flipped back on, because I remember raiding a family pantry and just being like, because of jet lag, it was like, holy Christmas, all the stuff I didn't have for so long.
Right.
And I just realized,
I was going to ask that, how you found the transition back. Yeah.
Not well. And it's honestly, I would have rather just try to shirk it. But in America, there's so few healthy options readily available.
Right.
Though they are available, they're not readily available.
Sure.
And they're not what's seen as appealing. You go into a convenience store or a drugstore or even a gas station, you're not going to have good food readily available. It's going to be chips and
I
nonsense.
do recall that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do recall that.
Especially the places you visited.
Yeah. So what's your, back on the balance thing and goal setting and all that, what's your plan for preventing a recurrence of that when you relocate?
Well, my thing is
the same problem.
I've got. I think I have a particular time window set. I'm not 100% yet.
Sure.
But I have a time window set, and I'm just trying to. And I've been doing all right, but I'm trying to kick it into higher gear, of getting a balanced training schedule, more unbalanced in terms of eating, and that way I put myself back in that balanced frame of mind. Because once you have that, then everything kind of weight loss and all that other stuff isn't really something you need to think about. It's just something you do, right? And that's kind of my focus for the next week or so, is just, I found out I'm a morning training person. I knew this a little while ago and kind of let that slide.
Yeah.
So I'm going to focus on this kind of next week, is just wake up in the morning, get it done.
Right.
Once it's done, then move on with the rest of my day.
Right.
But I'm not going to let other stuff get in the way, because then it just gets in the way.
Sure. See, I'm the opposite. If I get up and I've got work or family or issues that will take my mind away from total focus when I'm training, I have to deal with that first. And my students notice this. They notice that the quality of my personal training will drop. I still teach well, but my own personal development will drop if I've got shit going on that needs to be dealt with. And like, for example, the last 18 months where I work, we've been undergoing an enormous restructure. It's been huge, and particularly the last 6 or 7 months of last year, things came to a head. It was getting real close to everything being finalized, but we still didn't know who was doing what or what was sitting where. And the stresses involved in that they had a massive effect on me, and it totally threw my own personal training off the rails. And my students noticed it, and the colleagues at the venue that I teach from, they noticed it. They're like, hey, what are you doing? You're not, we don't see you focused as much. Like, works in the way. And maybe you can look at that and say, well, I didn't balance that particularly well, but that's the way I deal with things in life. If it's causing me stress and giving me a hard time, I will focus 110% on that and kill it. Get it done, get it finished, square it away, so that I can then focus on what I want to do and focus on my training. So I tend to find, you talk about being a morning training person. I'm an end of the day training person after everything else has been squared away. So that was something we noticed from last year, and something I worked out. It was part of my journey was to actually finally, after I don't know how many years, identify that that's really a thing. Now, whether I can manage it's a different thing altogether. That's probably part of this year's goal, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. I kind
Yeah.
of went out there for a minute because my wife had called. So, but I had your headphone on one place, some phone on another. There's balance. There's balance for you.
It happens, and she's talking about cheese, and yeah, here we are. We're back at that again. Yeah.
No. She wasn't talking about cheese yet. Around this time.
Actually, I must comment. Where's the dog this time? We haven't had a comment from the dog.
No, we haven't had. He's all right. This week I'm keeping him occupied with eggshells.
Excellent.
Yeah. Go figure. I wasted like a bag of treats last time. Did us no good. Eggshells, on the other hand.
Really?
Yeah.
What's that about? The dog's playing with them, eating them?
Yeah, he just eats them. It's like he's just chilling.
Huh.
So, yeah, we actually had to figure out today, like, what kind of rabies vaccine he has, and kind of all this stuff. Good Lord, getting that dog relocated, it's going to be a mess.
I was going to ask that, or not necessarily in the podcast, whether the dog was going to, and it sounds like he is.
Are you kidding me? My wife would divorce me if he didn't come with us. Like, my daughter would never talk to me again.
That's actually really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're just trying to figure out what's the best way to do it, because it's a 14-hour flight. And
yeah. It's got to be incredibly stressful, because he isn't sitting even in economy class with you, and he certainly ain't getting business class. It's got to be really hard on an animal when they travel like that.
So
I would hate to be in that situation.
We're just getting him used to the travel crate. He gets used to travel crate. That way we can kind of balance out his whole, when he leaves. Okay, he's used to being in travel crate. Then we're gonna try to get like a hamster water feeder for him while he's there, and then he'll be hungry, but that's okay, because then once he gets out, he'll eat. Then we're trying to determine whether or not I go one place and then meet my wife and daughter in another, or we travel together.
Sure.
But we would have to do like a layover somewhere, and I don't want the dog to be in there longer if it's going to be a layover. So, but it's
a lot of things to consider.
Yeah, it gets you one way or the other, but you're not quite there yet. But I definitely hope people are a little more elucidated on balance, and what people take away from this is just keep in mind, if you want to be the best at martial arts you can be, you want to be the best at karate you can be, more power to you.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, what I would say to that is, it's the 80-20 rule. I've met, we'll call it the 80-20 rule. I was about to get even more technical than that, but stuff it, this will do. It's the 80-20 rule. 80% of people are going to be reasonably good at martial arts and reasonably good at everything else they do if they keep their balance right. There will always be the 20% of people who might be exceptional martial artists, out of this world martial artists, who, like I said, hey, there he is. I feel better now. Exceptional martial artists who can't hold down a job, can't maintain a relationship, and can't raise good kids. Yeah. And those people at the end of it, when you get down to it, those people aren't going to leave much of a legacy. In fact, the ones that I particularly know of who've lived lives like that, they're not, the kind of legacy they're going to leave is probably negative. So if I could get one message across to people, the message, the one thing that's stuck out to me through my martial arts, man, be part of the 80%.
Yeah,
except
definitely.
that you're not going to be number one. Take number 2 or number 3 place in the world, or in your community, or whatever it happens to be. Take that 2nd or 3rd spot, but make sure you're number 2 or number 3 in absolutely everything you do. And even then, you'll still have achieved more than 99.99 whatever % of the people on Earth who don't try and don't strive to achieve anything. Yeah. So be balanced in your approach. You'll appreciate it. Your body, your community, your relationships, everything will be better for it. That's exactly my 5 cents.
Yeah, man, right on with that. Is there any place somebody can contact you?
Me?
Yeah.
Good Lord. Yeah, me. Yeah, I can be found on Facebook. If you look up, I have a Facebook page for my dojo. It's called Ruken Khan Dojo. That's spelled Ryukenkan Dojo, Ruken Khan Dojo. You can look up that page on Facebook and send me a message, and I will respond. You can look up Marty Rickard on Facebook. You'll probably find a million different Marty Rickards, but I'm the one in New Zealand.
Yep.
I will take messages. I don't friend everybody, but I will take messages from anyone. Yeah, that's the easiest way to find me is one of those two ways. And I teach out of the Martial Arts Academy located in Tauranga, New Zealand. We also have a Facebook page, The Martial Arts Academy New Zealand. And you can contact me through there as well. And any of the other martial arts that teach out of TMAA. I should actually talk to them about sponsoring this somehow and make some noise. I think they'd be into that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see why they just wouldn't. Yeah, whatever. We'll talk about that a little
even
later.
just to come in for a chat, because the guys who started this place have some pretty out there ideas about how a martial arts community should run. This is the guy I was chatting with last night. I'll look into that because I think people could benefit from hearing what Scott has to say. Actually.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
And you can get, if you want to get in touch with me or the podcast, you can just email karatewithoutobi at gmail.com.
There we go. That's simple.
Yeah. I try to keep it that way. Okay. Well, we'll be catching you guys later. Anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Yeah, I'm going to go and play with my swimming pool. Ha!
Well, that sounds like a bit better than what I'm gonna do. Drive through lots of West Philly traffic for a half an hour.
Oh, you drive safely, and I promise I'll swim safely. We'll talk again later.
Definitely. All right, folks. Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye-bye.